Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Narayan. Welcome to this session. This session will devote on the features of classical conditioning propounded by Pavlov, a Russian psychologist. So, dear friends, let us talk about features of classical conditioning. Categorically, there are 5 basic features of classical conditioning. The first one is acquisition. The acquisition is learning a response or training to a neutral stimulus that occurs through the presentation of unconditional stimulus. In this context of classical conditioning, a training that is taking place between ball and food to lead the response or evoke the response by pairing neutral stimulus with unconditioned stimulus. When this is paired for many times, this is some sort of association is taking place. And it is called the acquisition process of classical conditioning. In a simple way, I can say that when neutral stimulus is paired with natural stimulus for a longer period, the neutral stimulus, that is bell, acquire the power or the properties of the natural stimulus, that is food. That acquiring the power of natural stimulus by the neutral stimulus is called the acquisition process of classical conditioning, which is derived from the experiment conducted by the Pavlov in relation to the classical conditioning. The second important feature is extinction. Extinction is the gradual disappearance of conditioned response, meaning saliva, to the conditioned stimulus, that is bell. In this process, Pavlov rang the bell and gave the food contingently that evoked the salivation of the dog. And it continued for many trials up to one trial, when the Pavlov just sounded the bell and did not provide any food, but Pavlov observed that the dog is continuing to salivate. He continued the same drama, meaning that a bell without food, bell without food, bell without food for quite some time. After some time, the dog is tired with the bell only and stop the salivation. And it is nothing except extinction. In simple way, I can say extinction is gradual disappearance of conditioned response to the conditioned stimulus, meaning that when Pavlov provided only bell without any food for a several time, dog stopped his salivation. This is called the process of extinction. The third features of classical conditioning prescribed by the Pavlov is spontaneous recovery. Spontaneous recovery is the reappearance of extinguished response or salivation after a period of time, even without food, is called the spontaneous recovery. In this process, after giving 1 or 2 days of rest to the dog completely, Pavlov rang the bell all of a sudden, even without food, but the dog started to salivate. This means that the dog has not forgotten fully the association established between the bell and the food. The fourth feature of classical conditioning is the stimulus generalization. Stimulus generalization generally refers to the salivation or conditioned response is given to stimuli that are similar to but not the same stimulus exactly. For example, Pavlov rang the church bell and then gave food contingently, and dog salivates. Now, Pavlov brought the other kinds of bell like school bell, doorbell, or telephone bell and rang any one of these bell and found that dog is salivating also. This implies that the dog salivate not only to the church bell sound but salivate to the sounds of other similar kind of bell as well. Such bell may be school bell, doorbell, or any other kind of bell, but not exactly the church bell. This means that the dog generalizes his salivation to the stimuli that are similar to the original bell, which was initially used church bell by the Pavlov. This is called the stimulus generalization in the classical conditioning experiment conducted by the Pavlov. The fifth feature is stimulus discrimination. Stimulus discrimination is the learned ability to respond differently to similar stimuli. For example, when the dog is learning to discriminate between different stimuli, he is waiting to the original bell, that is church bell, to ring so as to salivate. This means that dog salivate only to the Pavlov bell, that is church bell, but not to any other bell used by the Pavlov in his experiment. This confirms that the dog able to discriminate between to the church bell as a stimuli than the other kind of bell as a different stimuli. So this is all about the features of classical conditioning, the experiment conducted by the Pavlov. This is the end mark of this session, and hope you must have been benefited from this session. Thank you very much for listening.